of the things I wanted to say before we jump in, we're towards the end of this series that we've been laboring through in Nehemiah, our week 7 of an 8-week series. And the challenge every week when we come is that when we get to this part of the worship service, there is a challenge. Thank you. There's a challenge that we have, and the challenge is to be able to hear the Scriptures in the place that we are. There's two pieces to being able to learn, to grow, and to experience God's best from His Word. The first part, there's nothing you can do anything about, but fortunately you don't have to. That is, God's Word is powerful and it speaks to us. And it has the capacity to actually from the inside out take root and do something that's transformational in our lives to change us for the better. So that's why we expose ourselves to God's Word in an ongoing way. That's why we want to open, to read, to learn, to listen. But the second part is the part that you and I can do something about. And that's the piece where whatever state we find ourselves in, sometimes it takes us a great deal of energy and motivation to be present to that Word. See, because that Word can be powerful, but it'd be totally lost on me if I'm not in a place where I'm open, or ready, or receptive. It doesn't matter who the speaker is, really. And so, just on the verge of jumping into this next to last message in this series, there's this place that we go through from the beginning when we start in quiet and reflection all the way up to now. And I just wonder if as I am about to open the Word and speak to you, if we're in a place of readiness to hear it. Now, only you can answer that question for yourself. You can't answer it for your neighbor. You can't answer it for anybody else other than you. And so, if you were honest enough to say, yes, I'm ready, I'm open, I'm in a place where I want to learn, then great. We're about to jump in. But if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know that I am. I'm tired. I'm sad. I'm afraid. I'm distracted. I'm whatever. Then what I'd like to do is just to pause for a moment and in that quiet for you to ask God, in as honest a way as you know how, help me to get ready. Because today, there may well be something that comes from chapter 7, chapter 6, that has the capacity to really speak to you and really do something in you that might lead to a transformed you. I think there's something rich that we're about to read, but you have to be in a place of readiness. So if you're not there, it's not your fault. It's just where you are. You've done everything you could to get here. But I wonder in these few moments if you could just, in the quiet, ask God, could you help me to be as ready as I can be? Can you help me to be open to what it is that you want for me? And then as you do that, I'll pray. And together, when I finish, we'll pray the Lord's Prayer. And we'll open the Scriptures and I'll teach. Okay, so let's Lord, we've quieted ourselves to listen to the Scriptures. We've celebrated and shared what's going on in the community. We've sung love songs to you. And now we're ready to open your Word. And God, I ask that you would take the words that I speak, the thoughts and the meditations of my heart, and use them. May they be pleasing to you, and may they speak to others in a way that's transformational. Help me to be open to you, vulnerable. God, help each of us in the places that we are, just as best we can for this moment to open. And as you move among us, may you speak to us, and guide us, and lead us in the way that you would have us to go. As we move into this time, Lord, together as a community, we pray the prayer your Son taught us when we said, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Okay, you ready? Ready as you can. Anybody know this guy? Look familiar to anybody at all? It is not, but you're in the right field. I was going to say, I have $1,000 to anybody who knows this guy. But I wanted to kind of feel out first whether in fact his name is Douglas Mawson. I was not familiar with him until this week when I was doing a little bit of preparation for today. Does that help you at all, knowing that his name is Douglas Mawson?
I knew that.
Yeah.
Just ask if anybody knew it.
So, I was in preparation for today because the theme is staying the course. We're going to talk about the importance of perseverance and endurance when working on a rebuild, when trying to do something that is difficult and hard and long. And I was just so enthralled with this guy's story and the grit and gut and determination he had. So on the front end, I just want to read you an excerpt of his story. He's really quite an amazing man. He was an Australian scientist who at the beginning of the 20th century set out on a mission to explore, of all places, Antarctica. Now on December 14, 1912, Mawson and his two colleagues were returning to base when one of his colleagues fell into a crevasse, dragging their sled, the team's most valuable gear, including their 3-man tent, the 6 best huskies he had, all the food for the dogs, and nearly all the men's food. At that point, they were around 310 miles from home. In order to get back to the base, Mawson and his remaining colleague, because obviously when you fall deep into a crevasse, that is it for you. He had one remaining colleague who were going to have to trudge through a lifeless ice desert without shelter and only a third of the food required to make the journey. So he's lost his 6 best dogs, he's lost his tent, he's lost most of his food, and he's lost a lot of the steam engine to help him get to where he needs to go, and he's 310 miles away. After running out of food shortly thereafter, they were forced to eat the remaining dogs, which also forced them to have to carry their own sled. Eventually, his lone remaining colleague died from cold and exhaustion, leaving Mawson to soldier alone. Suffering conjunctivitis and frostbite so bad that his skin, his hair, and the soles of his feet began to fall off, Mawson trudged onward. One day, plowing through the deep snow, he broke through a snow bridge covering a hidden crevasse, and suddenly he found himself falling unchecked through space. Then a fierce jolt halted his plunge. The 14-foot harness rope attaching him to the sled had held, but now Mawson was sure that his weight would pull the sled in on top of him. He thought this was the end, but miraculously the sled stuck fast in the deep snow, anchoring him. But as his eyes adjusted to the semi-darkness, Mawson saw how hopeless his predicament was. He dangled free in space, the crevasse walls too far away to reach, even with the wild swing of a boot. His only chance to escape was to pull himself hand over hand up the harness rope. Providentially, he had tied knots in the rope at regular intervals. He seized the first knot and pulled himself upward, and then lunged for the next. Even for a fit, healthy man, such a feat would have been barely possible, yet Mawson pulled, rested, and lunged again. He reached the lip of the crevasse and tried to roll onto the surface above. That effort broke loose the overhanging lip, and Mawson fell all the way to the end of the harness rope. Despair overwhelmed him, and he pondered slipping out of the harness to plunge to the bottom of the crevasse, ending things at once, rather than by strangling or slowly freezing to death. At that moment, a verse from his favorite poet, Robert Service, flashed through his mind, which said, "Just have one more try. It's dead easy to die. It's the keeping on living that's hard." The words spurred him to one last tremendous effort, and as he reached the lip, he thrust his leg out first and then pulled the rest of his body free from the crevasse. He rolled over and passed out, waking an hour or two later to find his body covered with the dusting of new fallen snow. Mawson was now convinced that he had no chance to survive. Yet on January 29th, a minor miracle occurred. Just north of his track, Mawson saw something dark loom through the haze. It was a snow cairn covered with a black cloth. Inside, he found a message from 3 teammates who had been out searching and a bag of blessed food. From the note, Mawson learned that he stood only 28 miles from the hut or home base. It would take him 10 days to cover that short distance as he waited out a prolonged blizzard. But at last, on February 8th, he began the last descent. Before he could see the hut, he caught sight of a distant speck on the horizon. As he feared, it was the Aurora, the ship that came to bring him home, leaving Commonwealth Bay for good. A few moments later, the hut sprang into view, and outside it, 3 men were working at some task. Mawson stopped in his tracks and waved for about 30 seconds or so, until the men were able to see him. At last, one of them saw this apparition on the horizon, and they went to get him. Now, Mawson had missed catching the Aurora by a mere 5 hours. Instead, he and 6 men who were deputized to stay on to search for his party were condemned to spend another year in the windiest, coldest place on earth. Now the men at the hut rushed up the icy slope to embrace their leader and conduct him to safety. Still before settling down to the most well-deserved nap in the history of humankind, Mawson thought to send his fiancée back home. Probably the most understated words that have ever been uttered in the history of humanity. With no complaint, no self-pity, or mention of any of the horrors he had just endured, he wrote simply, "Deeply regret delay, only just managed to reach the hut." Another 10 months passed before the Aurora returned, and when Mawson finally reached Australia in February of 1914, he was greeted as a national hero and knighted by King George V. Why do I tell you that as we're getting started? I tell you that because I think perseverance is preferable to quitting. I tell you that because while our journeys may or may not be like that, our journeys are hard and they're long, and there are points along the way where we are tempted to quit. And I just want to say to you that wherever you find yourself in your current rebuild, just hang on a little bit longer. I think that what Nehemiah has for us today may well be of benefit to you. And so I'm so glad that you're here as we continue our journey through Nehemiah. If you have a Bible, turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 6. Nehemiah chapter 6. Now, for those of you who haven't been with us, Nehemiah has been helping a group of people for a long period of time try to do the impossible, and that is to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem, to provide some place of safety, to provide some place of protection from their enemies. The walls had been in ruin for 140 years. The people had been vulnerable to one attack after another. Nehemiah had it on his heart to go and do something about this. But after 140 years of apathy, rallying the troops probably wasn't a very easy thing to do for one man. And yet, Nehemiah did. He brought the people together. He even brought people from outside of the city. He gathered a group of people who night and day were working on rebuilding the walls so that the people who lived there could know life and life to the full. Well, we're making our way finally to chapter 6, where the finishing touches are being put on. And I just want to read to you the account in chapter 6 of some of the things that transpire, because I think some of the things we get here in chapter 6 may very well be helpful for you as you're trying to rebuild your financial ruin, your relational wreckage, your stained and muddy reputation. All of us in life hit areas where there is rubble, damage, destruction. We have to make choices as to what we're going to do when we hit that place, as to whether or not we go on and make it better, or just sit down in the middle of it in our apathy and wait to die. We have to make those choices. Listen to what Nehemiah does as we begin chapter 6. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies found out that I had finished rebuilding the wall, and that no gaps remained, though he had not yet set up the doors and the gates. So Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them in one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But I realized that they were plotting to harm me. So I replied by sending this message to them. I am engaged in a great work, so I cannot come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent the same message, and each time I gave the same reply. He's almost at the end. The walls are up. There are no more gaps. But having a wall with no gates is like having a house in the hood with no front door. They're still very vulnerable. And so as they move towards the end of the time where they're seeking to rebuild these walls, what happens is that he gets this message from his enemies. We're familiar with these guys at this point, Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab. There are many people who are thinking, we've got one last-ditch effort to stop this, right? I mean, the walls are up. The only thing that is left are the gates. If they get the gates up, we are sunk. So they keep pressing on and on and on, and they send this message not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. And as they send this message, Nehemiah responds. And he knows, he gets this sense of discernment that they are plotting to harm him. And so basically he responds and he says, I'm involved in something great. I cannot come. I should not come to stop in order just to come and meet with you, who have troubled and harassed and mocked me all along the way. And when we get to this point, one of the things that I want you to understand is this. If they are successful in stopping Nehemiah, then they can ruin the whole deal. No matter how much progress has been made, if they can stop him before the gates go up, then they will have accomplished what they needed to. They're desperate, which is why they keep sending a message. But Nehemiah is steadfast. And really, part of what I want to ask you now is this basic question. What if our life's actions and our well-being affects people more than just ourselves? You know, there are some of us who have this secret sin or this hidden pattern of behavior. And our greatest fear is that if this gets found out, not only is it going to ruin us, but it's going to ruin others as well. And so we live in fear at the thought that what's going on inside of us that nobody else can see is going to become damaging, but not just to ourselves, but to anybody else who cares about us. What if our life actions and our progress matters to more people than just ourselves? Because sometimes we can fool ourselves and think, well, this is just about me. We don't live in a vacuum. Our life impacts others greatly sometimes. Let me flip it the other way. Sometimes it's difficult to get up every day and open the Scriptures or create a place of silence and solitude to hear God's voice. Sometimes it's hard to serve others when we don't even feel like getting out of bed. Sometimes it's hard to put ourselves in a place where we are opening to God when we feel like God has done nothing for us lately. The discipline and the practice of opening ourselves to God in an ongoing way has not only something to do with our continued growth in character, but perhaps it has something to do with the kind of person you're becoming. I think almost every morning when I sit down to pray, or kneel down to pray, or open the scriptures, or give myself in solitude and silence, that this is as much for my sons and my daughter as it is for me. It's as much for my wife or my church as it is for me. You see, because I know that my life impacts theirs, for better and for worse. I know that. And if I do not become the man that God is calling me to be, then you're going to lose too. It's not only just about me. What if we get to a place where we realize that the stuff that's going on inside us, the stuff that we're having to battle, the stuff that we're having to deal with as we rebuild, is not just about us. It's also about the people in our lives and the people we're yet to meet. If God can, if our enemy can subdue us before the gates are up, the damage that will be done will be immeasurable. Sometimes it's the things we've done, sometimes it's the things we've not yet done. But there's a place here to understand that our life matters for more than just ourselves. We continue. Then reads in verse 5, the fifth time Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand, and this is what it said. There is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it is true. Now, what kind of credibility does Geshem have? He's the one who's been trying to stop the process the whole way. Geshem the Arab has no credibility whatsoever. He's probably the one who started the rumor. Geshem tells me it's true that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. He also reports that you have appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you, look, there is a king in Judah. You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king. So I suggest that you come and talk it over with me. This guy's like just a gnat that won't go away. I mean, he is trying to intimidate. He is trying to stop this project as quickly as he possibly can. He's running out of time. He's desperate. And now he's starting a rumor. He's trying to say something that isn't true. And I just want to ask you, as you're journeying, as you are moving through your rebuild, what is it that's distracting you from doing what you know you need to do? Because there are inevitable distractions along the way when you're trying to do the things that are going to help you get to the places you need to go. And I want you to identify those distractions, and then I want you to think about, well, how am I dealing with those distractions? Am I giving them unnecessary time and attention? They don't deserve my time and attention. This stuff that's being spread about me, there's enough other stuff that could be said of me that would be true, but this is not true. The last thing I want to do is to be their king. And he knows in his heart that this is just another attempt at his enemy to distract him from finishing the race. As we continue, I just want you to think about the distractions that are happening. Because inevitably, when your rebuild is longer than a day, you will be distracted. What are you doing as you're distracted? Listen to what Nehemiah does. Nehemiah replies, there's no truth in any part of your story. You are making up the whole thing. They were just trying to intimidate us, imagining that they could discourage us and stop the work. So I continue to work with even greater determination. How many of you, in an ongoing way, as you are seeking to do whatever it is, whatever the rebuilding work is that is going on in your life, How many of you have been confronted by fear? It visits me almost every day. You hope, you think, you dream that someday you're going to get to this place in your faith where fear no longer becomes an issue. I'm just going to tell you it's not true. It will always visit you. But you can determine what you're going to do with fear. You can greet it at the gate and dismiss it by applying just a little bit of faith, or you can invite it into your home and come and allow itself to make a home in you. And once it does, then your Lord will be feared. You will no longer be led by God. You will be led by a different spirit, not a holy one. They are trying to intimidate his enemies by fear. And they're spreading rumors and they're telling lies. And what Nehemiah does is he speaks the truth and he calls out and disavows the lie. And I wonder if there are any lies that you need to call out and disavow in your own life. Because some of the lies that you have been listening to and believing have been hindering you for far longer than you can imagine. You know, when you began to believe lies and assimilate them into your life, it begins to make you think about yourself in a certain way, and that certain way isn't good in any way. It's not redemptive, it's not helpful, it's not hopeful. Nehemiah says, that is a lie, and I will have nothing to do with it. And I wonder if we dealt with those kind of things that were going on in our lives that we knew weren't true, but that sometimes when we're feeling down on ourselves that we just heap on and on and on. You know what? Sometimes it's time to call out the lie and distance ourselves from it. If it's true, we own it. If there's a need for confession, we do that. But at some point, we have to distance ourselves from the things that would distract us and keep us from rebuilding. When Nehemiah does this, what does it say his next step is? Once he speaks the truth, he disavows the lie, what does he do? He works with even greater determination. Isn't it so easy when there are things said about us or things done to us that would make us feel less than our best self? That we would get to some place where we would feel just like giving up? Or we would say, what is the point? Why do I keep doing this? When Nehemiah disavowed the lie, it says he went back to work with even greater determination. When is it time for you with greater determination to go back to work? It may have been a week, it may have been a month, it may have been your lifetime that you feel like you've been fighting this battle. Truth is truth, and lies are lies. Let's not confuse the power of the two. Because once you allow by fear those lies to come in and to reshape and reform and dictate to you a certain path, you will be lost. Nehemiah calls us to live in the truth and with greater determination to press on, to press forward. And that's what we're going to do. As we continue, he says, later I went to visit Shemaiah, son of Deliah and grandson of Mehetabel, who was confined to his home. He said, let us meet together inside the temple of God and bolt the doors shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight. It just never stops. A couple of you in here who feel like that? It just never, ever, ever, ever seems to stop. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Nehemiah replies, should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No, I won't do it. I realized that God had not spoken to him, but that he had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. They were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin, and then they would be able to accuse and discredit me. The guy who he thought was trustworthy, the guy who he thought was a friend, now he finds out is on the enemy's payroll. More than wanting to be a trusted source for Nehemiah, he wanted a little do-re-mi. And so they paid him off to lie. They wanted to set a trap. And Nehemiah, as he has walked closely with God, was able to discern the difference between the truth and a lie. And that leads us to the place where we ask ourselves, which voices are we listening to as we continue our rebuild? Because there's going to be a great need to discern where God's voice is and where our enemy's voice is. You know, it's a struggle for me sometimes, and perhaps this is for you. You know, we're hitting the holidays, right? And we're getting into that place where already my mailbox is just falling out with catalogs of all the things that I needed that I didn't even know existed. And somehow I can ward it off that it's not for me as I think about getting gifts for others, right? Well, what happens if I'm paying off credit card debt to the tune of $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000, and I get these catalogs in the mail, and it plays on my sympathies, my desires? I'd like to be generous, but I've dug myself a hole. And I can't really be as generous as I want to be. What do I do with those commercials that come on and make me feel like I need to go get this or that or the other for somebody that I really love? Or somebody that I could care less about? Isn't that what we do around Christmas time? Everybody gets a gift. Even if we don't particularly like them, everybody gets a gift. And I just wonder in the middle of this, as we're seeking to try and we've been doing good since like July. We've been paying down debt, and the gap is closing, it's closing, closing. And then here comes November and December. Which voices are you going to listen to? I mean, I'm not creating a commercial for you to be stingy during the holidays, but I just want us to use good sense, because if we are generous to the point where we become enslaved to Visa or MasterCard, then we got a problem. And then that hole that you were digging out of, that you were doing well on, now you're super depressed during the holidays, because when you get that next credit card bill, it's going to have doubled, and you're going to feel like you've lost all the movement you were making. I just want to say to you, as we move through this time, you're going to hear a lot of advertisements, a lot of commercials, you're going to read a lot of things, you're going to see a lot of things. Just be mindful of which voice you're listening to. Because those happy voices that make things look really good and shiny and new and beautiful, they're not always the voice of God. Know yourself and know your current financial state before you go digging a deeper hole. That's all I'm saying. You know, one of the best gifts we can give to one another is during the holidays? Just a little civility and humanity. Just a little generosity of spirit. Just a kindness. Just a listening ear. Just a hug, a loving word. Do you know that more often than not, and this has been this way for me since I was a kid, you know, I hardly, you know, even if there's a little cash in the car, that's always nice, right? So somebody's going to give you a birthday gift, and give you a Christmas gift, that's nice. Check, cash, whatever, that's good. But I almost always, when I get a gift, I look to see if somebody's written something in the card, and if they've been thoughtful about what they had to say to me. And that is my greatest gift, when you take a few moments to think about something that you've noticed, something that has caused you to be mindful or grateful, and you've written that out. Why? It tells me you're paying attention. It tells me you value me. It tells me something special that has struck you, and you took the time. It fills me up like you can't believe. So you're all off the hook. You don't need to give me anything. But just be nice. Be kind. Be generous with your words. Okay? Really. We can do different, and God can lead us. Let's think about this. Which voice are you listening to? You've got stuff going on that maybe other people who are close to you know about. Maybe nobody knows at all. Your journey is long, and it's hard, and it's difficult, and it feels like it's been that way for a very long time. And the voices that you're listening to are telling you to isolate and cocoon. They're telling you to stay away from community. They're telling you not really to engage other people because other people tire you out. They take from you. And on some level, that is true. We do. We give and we take from one another. But I'm telling you, if you are moving towards a place of being sad to the point of depression, listen to the voice and understand and discern that the voice that is seeking for you to isolate and cocoon is not from God. Now more than ever, if you're sad, you need someone. You need many someones. And they're not going to all play the same role for you. They're not going to even fix what is broken in you. But they're going to help you be connected to life. And that's what you need right now for some of you. Just be careful as you go through the holidays, and some of you are going to be missing lost loved ones, and you're going to be sad about people who aren't around the dinner table, and you're going to be struggling with other issues that you're dealing with. Just be careful to the voices that you're listening to. The voice of God is not an isolating voice. The voice of God is one that draws us to community, to relationship, to fellowship, even when we're tired and we don't think we can do it. That's all I'm saying. We hit this spot in our rebuild where we have to ask ourselves, which voice am I listening to? Because the wrong voice could lead you down the wrong path and cause you to short-circuit your rebuild and never get to the place you really intended to go. Let's finish this up. Verse 14. Remember, O my God, all the evil things that Tobiah and Sanballat have done. And remember Noadiah the prophet and all the prophets like her who tried to intimidate him. He's naming names. He's going back and it's this place where we learned earlier where when he says remember them, what do you think he's meaning? Get them. Take care of them. Destroy them. You know what they've done to me. You know what they've been. They've been such a menace to us for so long. Get them. This is that place again where we need to let these toxic feelings out in the presence of God. I do not understand why it is important yet. But I know that in the presence of God, we have to name the things that are inside of us that cause us to become toxic individuals. It has to get out. And in God's presence, there's a purpose for that. And so, Nehemiah, who has responded with such great resolve and courage and dignity and faith, there is some part of him that just wants these people gone. So basically, he's like, God, get them. And that prayer is okay. It is, because you feel it anyway, don't you? And until those feelings get out, you cannot open to a place where what God has to give you in that interaction can take root. You're too full inside with the junk. That stuff needs to come out so that God can plant something different in you. There's a place in God's presence for releasing our junk. And he reminds us of that. So he names names and he says, get them, God. And then we get to verse 15. So on October 2nd, the wall was finished. Just 52 days after we had begun. 2.5 miles of rubble and broken wall, which sat for 140 years in 52 days, was completed. This was a government project, and they finished ahead of the deal. That never happens, does it? Can you imagine if they would quit? We'd have no Nehemiah. There'd be no story to tell. There'd be no principles for us to learn. I just want to ask you, when do you quit? When do you quit something? When is it time to give up? When it's hard? When you're afraid? When you're tired? When it gets difficult? When it's long? If God gave you something to do, you quit when it is finished. And only then. You quit when it's finished. some of you need to hear that. Because you're in a place where that's what you feel like doing more than anything. And I understand that. There have been many places along the way. I've quit a million times on stuff. But as I grow and as I learn, I understand that perseverance and endurance is preferable to quitting. Because when you quit, you don't get to see God's hand at work in your life, taking you to the place that He intended for you to be. You miss out. You lose. But not only do you lose, everybody else around you loses. And what would have been a blessing for the world becomes just nothing. What would have been, what might have been, what could have been. And you, it's just one more thing on your list, on your resume of failures. One more reason for you to feel bad about yourself. One more reason for you to confirm all of the lies that have been spoken to you over the years. You only quit something God gave you to do when that something to do has been finished. Let's listen to the last part and then I'll be done. Verse 16. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Wouldn't it be great to turn the tables on our enemies and let them experience just a little bit of humiliation and fear themselves? To realize as they look at our lives that the work that had been done in partnership with a mighty God. When they saw us, there was nothing else to say. There were no more rumors to spread. There were no more lies to tell. Because that finished work spoke clearly of the miracle that God had done. 52 days for 2.5 miles of wall that had laid in ruin for 140 years. 52 days. God was at work. And the enemies were humiliated. You know, so often in life, God does His best work in us. This growing, developing, maturing work in us through perseverance. And we don't get to see that work if we quit. In fact, in the book of Romans, Paul writes this passage, this little pericope, when he says, "We also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out His love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom He has given us." There's this word that so many of us love. It's called easy. I just wish this were easy, right? You know, being a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, a good friend, it's not easy. To live in this world and to navigate the chaos that is our life sometimes is anything other than easy, but that's what we want, right? I just like my job to be easy. I just like my parenting to be easy. I just like my relationship with my wife to be easy. I just like easy. Let me let you in on a little secret. It's probably no secret by now. There's no easy. There's no easy. Easy does not develop in me, the things that God is wanting to give birth to. Right? Paul says, we rejoice in our sufferings, not because we're masochists, but because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. What kind of character do you have? Listen, our character is shaped and molded by the sufferings we experience and our responses to it. And we can choose to become that individual that God made us to be, or we can shortcut the circuit by making choices that lead us away from God's best. There's no shortcut to maturity. There's no shortcut to character.
Hallelujah.
We, Paul says, Nehemiah says, must persevere. Because in that perseverance becomes the shaping and the molding of us. James then says, consider it pure joy. Really? Pure joy. Whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Come on, when's the last time you considered your sufferings and your trials to be pure joy?
Yes.
Pure joy. That's what James says. He's either crazy or he's on to something. I tend to think he's on to something. Really, 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 who is it that you're becoming these days? Who are you becoming? What are the trials and what are your enemies doing to dictate to you the life that you are going to live or not? As we're getting to the close of our series in Nehemiah, we're looking about the significance of rebuilding our personal worlds, our finances, our relationships, our reputations. As we're looking at those hard things in our lives, there is going to be some suffering that occurs. But what we do in the way that we approach that suffering is going to have everything to do not only with who we become, but our intended direction and future. It is not time to quit. It is not time to lose heart. It is not time to listen to the other voices that would cause us to get to a place where we would sit in our ruin for another 140 years. How long can we sit in apathy at the rubble around us and make excuses for why things are the way they are? There is at some point with greater determination that we look our enemy in the eye and we say to him, enough is enough.
Yes.
Enough is enough.
Yes.
What life do we want? What life do we want? We get to make those choices. There's so much that happens to us that we cannot control. But what we can control in the face of our greatest trials is our response to them. Nehemiah has given us 100 things to learn from. What a hero. What a hero. When you look at yourself in the mirror and you think about the life that is yours, wouldn't it be great to look into that mirror and despite whatever recent failures or past failures, whatever trials and difficulties, whatever struggles you may be having, wouldn't it be great to look into that mirror and understand that the work is only to be stopped when God has finished it? If God has given you something to do, you only quit when the work is finished. When the work is finished. Is the work finished? If the work's not finished, then let's learn from Nehemiah. 52 days in the face of 140 years. I bet those 52 days felt like 140 years. Can you imagine all that went into the rebuilding of that wall? Can you imagine? Can you imagine all that's going to take to go into the rebuilding of what is broken in your life? We've learned some things. Now it's time for application. And that's why I'm so glad you're here today. I'm so glad that you came today. Because some of you, maybe many of you, were wondering how much longer you could bear what it is that you have today. If you make the right choices, you can bear it for another day. And then another day. I think when Nehemiah started that he set a goal for 52 days. I think he thought it was going to take him forever, especially with all the opposition that was facing him. You might have a lot of rubble and a lot of opposition, but when Nehemiah's enemies saw, they were humiliated and they were afraid because they saw what? They saw God's work in what had been completed. What if your enemy, your opposition, could begin to see God's work in you? That'd be a mighty fine day. I want you to think about that as we go. So Lord, take these truths and teach us what we need to know as we move from this place to the next. May it fall into the fresh soil of a heart and a life that is receptive to truth, that has no more room for junk, that has no more room for toxic feelings, that has no more room for shame, no more room for fear, no more room for guilt, no more room for anger, no more room for anything that clouds out your word, which is true and alive and powerful. May we be receptive to your truth as you lead us into life and life more abundant. We pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
In just a minute. Done.